So glad you're with us again on Elevate Your Wealth. Brad Johansson along with Mark Stimpson, Casey Elkins. Gentlemen, it's always nice to be back with you. We good?
Oh, we're great. Great to see you.
Very good.
You're
Glad to be
festive
with you,
in green
Brad.
today.
Yeah, that's it.
You're popping.
That's it. Seahawks, baby.
There you go. We talk about change all the time. I want to spend a little bit more time talking on change because what you've been doing for decades is I know what I've been doing. I do what I do every day. I go to work, I get the paycheck. I'm pretty good at what I do. And I've worked on accumulating, and I've done this, and now I'm ready to retire. So what changes from accumulation to distribution phase? We're decumulating now. Why do you need an expert to do that if you've had a different advisor doing the same thing that you've done because you now need a specialist? So tell me, Casey, why do I have to change? And nobody has to do anything. It is creating options. Why is the accumulation phase so different from the distribution phase?
You know, it just inherently has to be, right? When you think about when you're working and building and saving for retirement, you need three things from your money. You need liquidity, you need income, and you need growth. But you go to work and you provide the income and you provide the liquidity in your checking and savings. So you use your 401k for growth. Now, when you go to retire, well, you're not creating the income, and that liquidity is going to disappear pretty fast if you don't have income. So now we look to that third bucket, which was originally a growth bucket, to create income, to produce liquidity, and still to grow. That's a tough ask, right? We're asking a lot from that singular investment. And so life is very different now that we're moving into retirement because we need to use other tools to create that income. We need to use other tools to create liquidity, and we need to be careful about how much risk we're taking to get the growth that we still need in retirement. And so, you know, when we're dollar cost averaging and building and saving for retirement, that market volatility actually can do us a favor because we're buying at a discount as we dollar cost average, and that works very well. But now as we move into retirement and we're starting to take income out of our assets, it's really easy to do when the market's going up. But when the market stumbles and we have to take money out, we're now cannibalizing that investment. And so things have got to change. They have got to be different because what made you successful is not what will keep you successful in retirement.
You know, and I'd like to add to that. We love the analogy of climbing Mount Everest. I think most people, if you've ever studied climbing of Mount Everest, you'll find the bulk of the people that perish on Mount Everest don't perish on the way up. The accumulation phase is much easier. There's a lot less to worry about. It's right. You put your head down, put the money in, let it grow. The market's going to do its thing up and down. But it's interesting. The bulk of the people that have died on Everest, and we know there's been a lot, they usually die on the way down, not on the way up. And we liken this to decumulation. There are so many more pieces to decumulation when you think about taxes come into play, much more so than they ever do on the accumulation side, right? What about long-term care? That usually is going to come on the decumulation, right? Because we're older. That's just a natural transition. We've got to worry about inflation a lot more on the way down because most of us are going to be on a fixed income, right? Where is your income going to be guaranteed? So there's a lot more things that can affect us in a negative way on the way down the mountain versus on the way up. And I think if you don't really work with someone that specializes in true retirement planning and takes all these other obstacles and things that can, you know, run out of oxygen, you might say, on the way down, it can turn out to be a deadly mistake. And we've talked about this all the time. I want to have our clients have money until their last breath. We don't want them to die, you know, halfway down the mountain, right? That's a problem. And so we care about this. And I think there's just a lot that gets missed in the accumulation world when it comes to bringing the people down the mountain. You need an advisor that specializes in true retirement planning because there is a tremendous difference.
Yeah, it is very different because there's the amount of decisions that you have to make. The comparison is not even there. The decisions you have to make when you're accumulating is single faceted. How much am I going to save? And inside my 401k, if I'm lucky, there's 20 different investment choices. In retirement, it's very different, right? When we move our money into an IRA, we have a lot more investment choices, which is great. But now you have to figure out how much income you can take. What do taxes look like? What do I do for Medicare, Social Security? All of those things are decisions that have to be made that when you were 40, you were 25 years before you retired, those weren't even thoughts in your mind at that point. You just needed to save. You just had to decide how much to put in. And so now things are suddenly vastly different.
Which is a problem.
Yeah.
Here's the problem. Emotionally, I'm not ready for that. Look, I know people get to the age where they say, this is the way to do it. I would not like to change, which then becomes an emotional play on this. And we talk about the psychology of this a lot. That people make emotional decisions on this, and why would I do it any differently than I've done for the last 40 years? How hard is it now in working with clients to say that we have to adjust not only emotionally, but the plan has to be kind of a living, breathing plan. That when we got a lot, when you say climbing down the mountain, we got a lot more what ifs coming because life is going to change as we change. Why is this becoming so much important that we have to have coachability on the way to, I mean, is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
Very fair. In fact, I love that analogy, because it's like if we're coming down Everest, right, and maybe we've got our Sherpa with it or our guide, and he's saying these are the dangers. Are we going to be willing to listen? And how many people have died on Everest because they thought they knew better, or they didn't want to listen. They were in a hurry. Whatever it might be. Point is, if you've got a planner that you're working with, hopefully he specializes in retirement planning. If he doesn't, you might want to check into talking with one, right? Because they're going to help you, I think, make decisions that an accumulation advisor it isn't their bailiwick, we might call it. It's not what they specialize in. It does take a special type of planner to do what we do, and we're very proud to help bring people down the mountain, right? Yeah. Because if you don't do this right, it can be a bad road going down that mountain.
Casey, ROI, I want to point this out because we've always done, I want return on investment. Yeah. And now you are changing into this, and I've kind of heard you talk that it now becomes more reliability of income. Our ROI has to be based on what are we doing to make sure that this is guaranteed the rest of our lives.
Well, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, right? Suddenly we've retired and we have more time, which is great, but we have less or maybe even no income at this stage. And so it's about taking the assets that we have, that we were focused on return of investment, right? Now we're focused on making those assets reliable in creating income. Because we live in an income-based society. That income is what gives us confidence to go spend and enjoy the time that we have. But if we're so focused on just growing the assets and taking out a minimal amount, that's really not retirement. That's not the golden years. That's not, when we ask clients what they want to do in retirement, nobody has ever told us, well, I'd like to become a financial planner and worry about my investments every day. Nobody's ever said those words to us, and they're never going to, because what they want to do is to go and enjoy it. And what it takes to do that is reliable, sustainable income that we can't outlive. Because if there's a potential to outlive our assets, we will live in fear of that for the rest of our lives and not touch the money. And we have seen people do that time and again that don't have solid retirement plans. And that's what this all comes back to, is a solid, reliable plan that creates reliable income.
Yeah, and you want reliability to last for the rest of your life. And you want somebody to guide you down the mountain to elevate your wealth. To understand that the plan is going to work and have confidence that it will. How about a second opinion for that right now? 844-342-7142 to put together a complimentary written financial plan that is yours and yours alone. A guide down the mountain. Want some help? 844-342-7142. Back after this.
It's actually a pretty interesting story. My mom actually worked for a group of financial planners, and she'd worked for them since before I was born. Ultimately, I ended up working in industrial process control and instrumentation, which to most people means nothing and honestly sounds kind of boring, but it's pretty interesting. You get to see all the equipment that allows factories to make the things that they make. But as I was going through that, my wife got sick. And what I found was that nobody had answers about what the best route was medically to make sure that insurance was going to cover what we needed, that she could get the care that she needed. And so I realized that that industry really is broken, right? There really isn't the care, and there's not somebody that you can lean on to help you make the right decisions. And so as time went on, what I found too is I've got a natural aptitude for finances, and a lot of my coworkers would come to me and ask me questions about how they should invest and what to do with their 401k, because it was something that I kind of naturally was involved with in my own way. As time went on, I found a way to be able to do that. I saved, I went back to school, and ultimately Mark and I formed Elevated Financial Management, and here we are doing things, like I said, just a little bit different in Seattle.
So glad you're with us on Elevate Your Wealth. We're talking about what has changed. You've gone on the accumulation. Now we're in distribution. How do we figure out how to do it differently? Well, all of this is in the book. It is Break the Glass. It is Fireproofing Your Retirement. Want a copy? To have all of this as kind of a guide through this journey on the other end of this, scan the QR code that's on your screen, breakingtheglassbook.com. You can go to the website. We'll send it out to you for free so that we can help you on this journey into retirement that is so difficult. Going into this, I said about the changes, guys. I want to talk a little bit about the healthcare. Why does this become so significantly different? I mean, for a lot of people, this may be their top concern. A lot of it is taxes, but certainly medical is going to be one of the biggest unknowns that we have moving into retirement.
Yeah, it's just because our health is unknown, right? I mean, that is one of the biggest unknowns that any of us have. Even at a younger age, we don't know what that looks like. And, my wife was diagnosed with a chronic disease at a very young age. And so that's had an impact on our financial cost, or our medical costs, I should say. And so that's a concern. But especially as you age, as you get older, and now we're on a more fixed income, we'll call it. And as healthcare costs continue to go up, which they don't go up at the same rate that inflation does. CPI is a very different rate from healthcare costs. I think the most recent number I saw was that healthcare costs rise at like 20% or 30% more than CPI does. And so because of that, it's really not a one-to-one in our minds. And what that healthcare cost could be in retirement is often a big question mark for people, and that creates a lot of concern because of that unknowability. And so it comes back to having a plan that accounts for that and helps to put something solid in place.
And long-term care, when we talk about that, the problem is it's hard to avoid the stats. I'd love to be the 1 out of 10, but it's 7 out of 10 now who are 65. And we're just talking about healthy people who are going to require long-term care at the end. How do you plan for that if we're going to do it?
You know, this is something that's kind of dear to my heart simply because I'm in this planning business because of what I watched happen to my own family on my dad's side. My grandfather got Alzheimer's, and when he went in the facility at age 91, he lasted close to 6 more years. And the staggering amount of money that they went through, they basically lost all of their liquid assets. We were able to keep the farm back in Iowa. But the point is, in Seattle right now, we know we've got clients that are anywhere between $12,000 and $15,000 a month now, depending on the level of care that is being required and the facility that you're in. And so people tend to not want to talk about this. Now, we bring it up with every client, but it tends for a lot of people to get kind of shoved under the carpet because they don't want to talk or have their kids worry about their own mortality. But it's coming, as you mentioned, it's coming for every one of us. We've got to be willing to address this because if something's going to blow up a really good plan, it's going to be long-term care. The costs are staggering. Medicare is not going to cover except maybe up to 100 days, but I tell most clients, don't count on them for 1 day, because if you aren't on a skilled level of care in that hospital, if you're only needing help with activities of daily living, we call them ADLs, bathing, dressing, toileting, transferring, if you're not doing those, then Medicare won't give you a dime. And so again, this is something that needs to be addressed, and we need to figure out a way to help our clients want to bridge that gap, because there's basically 3 ways to pay for long-term care. You're either going to self-insure, which is, we have a lot of clients that are doing that now. The second way is you're going to have to buy some sort of either hybrid life insurance policy, which we really like, or what we call a standalone long-term care plan, but they're very expensive. costs have gone up dramatically over the last 25 years. Or the third way is the option most of us don't want, where we end up broke and we end up having to go on Medicaid. So again, we want to help our clients understand these three options, because that's it. Those are the only options you have. So what's the most effective way? Casey and I do spend some time on this with every client, because we believe if they just don't want to deal with it or talk about it, it could be disastrous in the long run. If they're, like you said, 7 and 10 is a high number.
Yeah.
I think we all need to know how realistic
And
that
if
is.
we get to that, then it becomes an emotional decision. We talk about this psychological all the time. Is that why it's important to make the decision before it becomes an emotional
No,
decision?
you're absolutely right, because the emotional decisions, as we've talked about before, are often the ones that we regret the most, right? And it's because we're backed into a corner. And if we don't put a plan in place, I've said this before and we'll say it again, if you don't put a plan in place for long-term care, the state has one for you, and it's not one that you're going to like. But in advance, you do have some options and you can be educated about them. But oftentimes what we see is people kind of let this be the boogeyman in the closet, right? It's the boogeyman, it's scary, they don't want to address it, it's not fun to talk about. And it isn't fun for us to talk about either. It's not something that we enjoy, but that doesn't mean that it's not important. That doesn't mean that it's not a vital step in a successful retirement plan. And so the way that you get away from being scared of the boogeyman is you open the door and you face them head on. And that's what we're trying to do when we talk about long-term care, or when we talk about tax planning, or whatever it is that we're talking about on our show. It all comes back to dealing with those concerns so that we can alleviate the stress, put a plan in place, and enjoy the retirement.
Okay, I put this up there, and I want you to scan the code before we go to break, but we talk about this as part of a plan, the ripple effect, the dominoes, all of this. Give me an idea, and people are reticent to do this, to walk into the office. I've made a mistake, haven't done it very well. I feel ashamed of what I've got or haven't got. And I've worked with an advisor that I don't really talk very much with, and you keep talking about these big box. Yeah, I'm with one of those, and it's worked okay in the accumulation phase. This whole change thing is difficult for me. Can you walk me through what it looks like to walk into the office? And I can breathe a sigh of relief to say this is not going to be so bad, because you guys are going to walk me through what a plan looks like.
You know, we have an interesting room out front where we welcome clients in, and on our TV screen, we don't run Dow numbers or S&P numbers. We have animals playing on a channel, right, that we love. And Samsung's got a great, what's the name of it, Case? I can't even think right now. Anyway, it's a great animal station, right? And it'll have dogs, cats, baby goats. The list goes on, but it's a great way for clients when they come in, they like decompress. They sit there, it takes the pressure off, because a lot of them, first time, they're thinking, what are these guys going to try and sell me? The one thing I want our viewers to understand, if you ever come into our office, what you're seeing today is the way we are. We're going to have a conversation. You're going to leave your checkbook at home, and we're just going to talk about you and where you are at in the retirement planning process. That's all we want to do, because we don't know if you're going to be a good fit or if you even need any help. But the point is, if you never take a step, right, you'll never get to whatever goal you're trying to do. You've got to take some action. We talk about that all the time on radio or TV or our workshops. And we just want everyone to know that's listening, or I say viewing to our viewers, that it's going to be painless in that regard. We're just going to have a conversation, no more. And then we'll decide whether we want to maybe engage and take it to the next step.
You could probably use a second opinion, and maybe something to give a sigh of relief, to say, am I in the right spot? Do I need a little bit of something? To call now, 844-342-7142, to put together your complimentary written financial plan. Wouldn't you like to have a little bit of a peace of mind to be able to say, this is gonna work? 844-342-7142. Back after this.
At first, I thought I was going to become an iron worker, and after I graduated from high school, I drove from Virginia out to Wyoming, where my dad was at. My parents had just got divorced, and I watched my grandfather on my dad's side. My grandfather got Alzheimer's and spent the last several years of his life in a nursing facility, and I watched them be devastated at the cost at the time, because they didn't have any insurance and that created a real problem for them. They lost the bulk of their assets, liquid assets. They were able to retain the farm back in Iowa, but it taught me a lesson that I don't want to ever go through that. I don't want my children to have to go through this. And so I met an individual at an event that I was doing, a party basically at his house, and he invited me to come to his house the next day. And I decided to check it out. And he said, Mark, you would be very good at this. And it was basically in the long-term care business, Medicare and Medicaid planning to a certain degree. So I help people get Medicare figured out, but then it also spurred me into the long-term care field as well. So again, that's really how I got into this business to begin with.
Glad you're with us. Elevate Your Wealth. We don't have a whole lot of time left, but how much time do you have left to try and figure this out? Look, we want to make it last as long as we possibly can. Unfortunately, the crystal ball is broken for all of us, so it is planning for the what if. We're talking about the rising costs in retirement as we move forward in the last few minutes here. I've said before this is not a number, and yet most of us still plan on trying to figure out a number. Why is retirement not linear?
Yeah, retirement spending is not linear, and it really can't be, because there's different phases to retirement. There's three main phases that we talk about. There's the go-go years, when we're up, we've got the energy, we're traveling, we're doing all those things we want to do. We've got the slow-go years, where things are a little bit different, we're winding down, and then we've got the no-go years. And so spending is different across those three phases, and it should be.
And you may have couples who are not necessarily in the same years.
Yeah.
One's go-go and one's slow-go,
yeah.
and one's not.
That is
so
the
you're
case.
trying to figure out, hold that adjustment.
Yeah, exactly. And we are trying to figure out the best way to go about that. And this really comes back to why there isn't a one-size-fits-all plan, because it is different. Each couple is different, the assets that they have. But the spending in retirement is going to be based on the phase that you're in and on the goals that you want to achieve, what it is that you want to do. And I've got a great example of this. A husband and wife. And the wife was thinking that when they moved into retirement, they were going to travel. The husband was on board with this plan. That's what he wanted to do. They both had this great plan to travel. She got to retirement and she decided, you know what, I really don't want to travel anymore. I'm not sure why. I don't want to. I want to stay at home. I want to work in the garden. Well, those are two very different views of retirement. Both things that can be enjoyable and both can be fulfilling and satisfying in somebody's life, but they have very different costs associated. And so as time goes on, those goals shift, things change, and our income has to adjust with our life. Instead of trying to make our life fit our income or make our life fit our finances, how do we make the dollars work for us in the way that we want them to?
Okay, so the dollars are going to change as well. The government's going to tell us that inflation's somewhere in the 2% range. Mark's already laughing at me. I mean, look, 50-year average is 3.8% on inflation. Do we have to figure inflation numbers if we're going to live for another 30 years in retirement?
If you don't, you're probably going to be very depressed even 10 years down the road, right? We always use inflation, a number, to help our clients know that their purchasing power of that basket of goods is always going to be there. It's not going to be eroded over time. That's the problem with a lot of our Boeing pensions. That's a static pension. They don't have a COLA built into that pension. So what they started with on year one is the same dollars they're getting 20 years down the road. Now that is a lot less buying power. And today, what's interesting, the government will tell us, well, inflation is slowing down, but isn't it interesting? The cost of the goods are still up here. We're all feeling that. In Washington, all we have to do is talk about a gallon of gas or a gallon of diesel, right? It's brutal right now. So even if inflation comes down, that's just the prices going forward. It's not like the price of those goods has come down. They don't reset, and you don't get to start all over. How many of us remember when we could go to McDonald's and you could spend $5 or $6, right, for a pretty good meal? Well, now that doesn't even get you a kiddie meal. Right? So again, let alone, a Big Mac, fries, and a drink or whatever it is that's your fancy. But the point is that inflation does matter. And these numbers, these costs of things right now, all of us know you better have a plan for that in retirement.
And the cost of living as it affects retirees is different than what CPI says. We all have different baskets of goods, and Again, this is Wall Street or statistical folks trying to shove everybody into a particular bucket or a particular basket. But the basket of goods that I buy is different than what you buy, Brad. It's different than what Mark buys. We all spend our money on different things, and our goals in retirement, again, are different. So, for me, I like cars. I like motorcycles, right? And the cost associated there gets affected differently than it does with inflation on other items, right? So there's other things that aren't affected as much. But, we see travel, like, for example, Mark's talking about gas. Well, that's going to make the plane tickets cost go up, right? Which makes our travel more expensive, and rental cars and all these things. So what your goals are in retirement directly relates to how inflation is going to impact your individual retirement. And it's a strong, solid plan that gives you the confidence to deal with it.
Is it fair to say that flexibility then matters more than precision on this?
That is absolutely 100% correct. Because if you've pigeonholed yourself down a certain path, right, you're not going to have the flexibility that you're going to need when these adjustments for, like Casey, the cost of cars or vacations or just traveling to be with your grandchildren, right? You have to have a plan for this. Inflation matters. And so we spend a lot of time on making sure that our plans are inflation protected, right? Because if you don't, the things that you wanted to do in the future probably aren't going to happen because you're just not going to have the ability to pay for them like you thought you were.
All of that is in the book. I want to have that up for you now real quick before we get to the phone number again. It is breaktheglassbook.com. You can scan the QR code here. It is yours for free. Anything that we can put in your hands that makes it easier for you, maybe even easier just to reach out for a second opinion, which is where we have the phone number. So I hope you scanned that, because I know I want you to call at 844-342-7142. The idea is to help. Yours is different than what somebody else needs. So help us to understand what it is you need. Do you want a second opinion? Do you want a plan that's going to work? Let's make your money last the way that you want it to be. Let's be flexible. 844-342-7142. Grateful for your time here. We really can't wait to see you in the office. Hope you make that decision by making the call today, and we'll see you right back here next time on Elevate Your Wealth.